This is a short bite episode of Homeschool Together. Hello and welcome back to Homeschool Together, short bite edition. Today we're going to be reviewing another curriculum. We know you people are out there looking for little bits of curriculum and you're trying to get some ideas, especially coming into the new year, or maybe you are finishing a curriculum and you're looking to get something to do more of a review or to help drive mastery. Today we're talking about Beyond the Code, which is an adjunct to the Explode the Code curriculum, very famous phonics-based curriculum. Typically we are using the Explode the Code and the Beyond the Code curriculum as a bolt-on to review when we finish in All About Reading was it level or session or whatever it might be?
Right.
I know I always get the Right Start Math and the All About Reading.
It's because All About Reading is in numbers and Right Start's in letters. It's cool. Yeah, it's still level.
It's level. So we are right now towards I would say 60% of the way through the All About Reading level 2. But we chose when we went to Ireland to bring some curriculum with us, but I didn't want to bring the All About Reading curriculum with us because there's too much stuff with all the cards and the letter tiles.
It's valuable too. I didn't want to lose anything.
And it's very valuable. And I'm not saying that Explode the Code is not worth the value, but a $10 workbook is way cheaper than,
right,
expensive All About Reading. Heck, I think the readers in All About Reading are more expensive.
Oh my gosh, those things are like gold. We actually lost one for a little bit when we were there.
It was a little dangerous.
That was a really scary situation. We turned the place upside down to find that reader.
Exactly. So we brought, and we went ahead and brought the Explode the Code, which I think we've already reviewed, but we did not finish the Beyond the Code. So I brought both of them. But we hadn't finished it yet, and we did most of it while we were in Ireland, but we have just recently finished the Beyond the Code level 2. So it's kind of weird. We did our review about halfway through our All About Reading curriculum, but that's okay. It's just how we had to swing it for this travel that we did. So Beyond the Code is basically a reading, comprehension, reasoning skills. If you know how to do the Explode the Code, it's basically a lot of exercises where you're circling words, you're writing words, you're reading words, you're identifying pictures, and then you're writing those words or identifying the words that are associated with the pictures. Beyond the Code is more of short stories. And this is like essentially the readers for Explode the Code. And they, as far as I can understand it, is that Beyond the Code lives between some of the lessons of like Explode the Code, I think level 3 or C. Do they use numbers or letters? I can't remember.
It's
numbers.
It's numbers. It's letters in the Get Ready for the Code, which we were also doing with our little one.
Yes, I'm very my brain is all mush with all the with all the namings and letters. But so it kind of lives between like I think 3 and 4 Explode the Code, like the numbers wise. So Beyond the Code will be there. Level 1 is I think between 2 and 3.
Yeah,
and then between 3 and 4.
You're not supposed to just do. You're not supposed to do just like Explode the Code 1 and then go into Beyond the Code 1 because it's a little bit too advanced. Yeah, you have to. You're doing a greater number of Explode the Codes in relation to Beyond the Codes. And what I would say to do, because I don't think there's great guidance. I mean, I think that there's I think the guidance from the company is lacking. If there's one thing I would say about Beyond the Code, it's that they don't tell you exactly when to use it, or at least I've not found. If y'all have that reference, I'd love to see it. But I think that this is a $10 book, as we said. So I would just get it and then figure out when you think your learner's ready for it, and then you can fold it in.
And for those at home that are driving at home and trying to understand, where does this Beyond the Code number 2? We've already talked about number 1. I think we reviewed it last year. Where does number 2 live? If you are in All About Reading, I say it's squarely right in the middle of that curriculum. So if you're All About Reading level 2, the second level, you could do this Beyond the Code somewhere right in there or at the end of that curriculum.
Yeah, as a review.
This was not something that was, it wasn't way ahead of that curriculum, but I would not do this level without having done at least some of All About Reading 2. This would have been very difficult for my daughter if I had done this just after All About Reading level 1. There were some letter sounds and letter combos A lot of sight words in here that I don't think she had been exposed to yet, but now she has. And so I would wait. If you have to try to target a timeline, it's somewhere in that range. And so she's basically end of first grade, starting second grade reading. And that's kind of where she is right now.
Right.
I think we just recently had her tested, and that's kind of where she fell.
Yeah, right at the end of first grade.
And so Beyond the Code essentially is a sequence of short stories. I think in the first one, Beyond the Code level 1, there were, I think, 10 or 11 short stories, and they tended to be about 3 or 4 pages long. Beyond the Code 2 has about 7 short stories, and they tend to be a little bit longer. We're talking about 5, 6, and there were a couple at the end that were about 7 pages long. And if you could imagine, if you've used the All About Reading early readers, it's very comparable to one of their stories on the second book. Not the first book, but the second book. And we're talking maybe about 4 or 5 sentences per page in 2 sections. So maybe 10 sentences per page. And then having about 6 pages of those, maybe.
Yeah, that's a good amount of reading.
It's a really good amount of reading. And I noticed that my daughter at the beginning was a little difficult for her to like push through to the end of those stories, because it's, 500 words maybe at the end. And it's tough for her to get that much stamina on reading. Towards the end, I think she was able to, get through all 7 or 8 pages. Every single section of the Beyond the Code is focused on that short story. The short story is kind of in the middle of what would be the lesson, and it leads with a little bit of vocabulary. So there's a lot of times there's new words that are being introduced. These can be sight words. Very often they're sight words. And then they're also introducing some concept as well, maybe some type of theme that's going to be within that story, some type of maybe a place. Like if it's set in a city, they're going to have a lot of words that associate to the city. If they're out in the wilderness, they're going to be talking more about like trees and plants and streams. And that's what the vocabulary words would be associated with that. And then there's also, once you've learned those vocabulary words, they ask you to read some sentences and then identify those to a picture. So you have about 2 or 3 pages where you're working with the vocabulary that is going to be in that short story. And so once you get through that, you read the short story. Once the short story is done, they present you with reading comprehension questions. And this is asking your learner to read a simple sentence that is also including the vocabulary from the story, and also including references to that story. So they have to remember what they've read. And then they have to kind of answer questions. Yes, no, I don't really know. And sometimes we have to go back into the story and say, hey, what did that girl, did she really like that thing or did she not like that thing? And we try to find that area, reread that section to answer those questions. And then there's also a follow-on where they read another set of questions and they have to do some handwriting in there. Now, with the handwriting, I've been kind of following your lead on that, where I ask my daughter to answer the question, and we write we work through a simple sentence that she can write there, and I will write that, and then I will erase 1 or 2 words that I know she can spell, and then I would ask her to spell that. So in this case, it would be like, name 2 things that you can climb that are not a tree. Well, you can climb onto a counter or you can climb onto a couch, right? So I would write, I can climb on a couch. I can climb on a table or something like that. And then I would erase the word can and then maybe a word as well. And then I would ask her to write those words.
Yeah, I think one of the things is that some of these, the writing that they ask them to do, if you're just relying on what they can spell, then the answers become a bit too simple and don't allow them to really, use critical thinking about the story. So, if you need to take some shortcuts because your learner isn't there yet with their spelling, or doesn't have the stamina to do a ton of handwriting, that's a good way to go.
Yeah, and there's also a little bit of an art section in every single, essentially lesson that wraps around the short story that then pertains to that short story. So if your child wants to do some artwork and whatnot, you can have them kind of play with the characters from the story. I think the first one was about a pig, so then you could take the pig and then draw bows and whatnot, whatever you want. I think our daughter did like googly eyes on the pig. So it was really cute and fun and enjoyable. The drawings are I think the person who graduated doing the drawings on Bob books.
These are the worst drawings.
And they went to Beyond the Code and they got hired to do the drawings there.
They're terrible.
Yeah. But they're great. They're actually kind of endearing. It's kind of like the scribble scratch endearing.
It's gotten to that point, where it's almost like when you're looking at your kid's own artwork and you go, oh, we've done enough of the Explode the Code, Beyond the Code stuff now that we're like, okay. At first I was like, really, this is what we got. But our daughter doesn't mind, and occasionally they have. My only complaint with it would be occasionally they have things there that. They're pointing, they're trying to get your child to guess a word, and they're using a word that the kids would not use now. Like one of them, I think that was earlier on, was like they pointed at a woman's skirt, and it was supposed to be slip. And our daughter's like, "What's a?" And I was like, "Oh, it's a slip." She goes, "But she's not falling." I'm like, "No, it's a slip. It goes under your dress." Like, I had to explain the whole thing to her, and I think that's kind of defeats the purpose if they can't figure it out by themselves. So there's a few of those where you're like,
there's a few of those.
This doesn't, or their little drawings are so crude, and they've pointed the arrow at something, and you're like, I don't even know what that is.
Anyone who's used the Explode the Code, workbooks knows exactly those drawings, and it's the same drawings in the Beyond the Code as well. So. It is what it is.
That's my minor quibble. It's not like it happens all the time, but it is. Other than that, we really like it.
At least the quality is consistent.
Yeah, that's true. Other than a few times where we do have to step in and help with something that's not knowledge kids would have. It's a really good program. We really like it, and it's very affordable. I mean,
affordable.
This book is $9 on Rainbow Resource, and if you don't have enough to get free shipping, I would just recommend going to bookfinder.com and searching there with the ISBN. Don't buy this new on Amazon for $18 because you can get it for like $10, $11, even with shipping on another site. So don't do that. But Rainbow Resource has I think the best price on it. It's like $9.19, which is a strange number to have it be. But anyways, it's under $10 there. And if you're already making an order for some other stuff, that would be a good pickup.
Yeah. And so how I approached each lesson, I would probably want to talk a little bit about that, is so you have all the pre-vocabulary work before the short story, then you have the short story, and then you have the follow-on work. It is you have to gauge how your student is doing, but I would typically do one day would be all the vocabulary work before. The next day we will then do the short story. But before we do the short story, we go to the previous page and we look at the vocabulary to try to remind ourselves, here are some unique words that we're going to be exposed to, and we're going to want to remember these so that when we're reading them, we don't have to sound them out or guess or whatnot. These are words that we have to know for the short story. Then we will then read that short story, maybe take about 20 minutes or so, maybe a little bit less, to actually read the story. And that would be the day. Now, the question is how much stamina your kid has at the end of that, whether or not you go ahead and answer those reading comprehension questions. If you are trying to drive mastery a little bit more, that's something I try to do. So the following day, I would then have her reread the story, the first half of it. And then the next day I have her reread it again. And then I would have her go ahead the next day to then start answering the questions and then finish out that lesson. So for about, one lesson, I can do it in about 4 days. Sometimes we did a little bit faster if the story was really exciting and she just pushed all the way through and she had a good stamina or she had a good reading day. Maybe we could do that in about 3 days, where I would have her do the reading comprehension questions and then we'd back out. The next day we would finish the rest of the sentence and the questions with the sentences and a few of the other activities, and then that would end that lesson. 3 to 4 days worth for one lesson. And so if you imagine you have about 7 or 8 of these short stories, you can do it in about 2 months. And so that was kind of the cadence we did. And we didn't spend more than, about 15, 20 minutes a day on this. And then this was also, I was pairing this with the Explode the Code at the same time. So I would give her the Explode the Code. I would tell her, hey, just do 4 pages. And then she would go off and do that on her own because it's a workbook based and everything like that. And then we would then come back together and then we would do the Beyond the Code and we would do those kind of together. And that's how we did the homeschool on the road. But if you're just doing this as a separate thing, 15, 20 minutes for 3 to 4 times a week, you can get through it in about 2 months. And so that's, I think for $10, it's not bad.
Yeah, I think it's a deal.
Yeah, and it's really nice. And the stories I thought the stories were better this time around. The drawings are the drawings, but I thought the stories were very enjoyable.
She seemed to like them too.
She did, and she remembered them, and some of them were really funny. Like I think the pig one was funny. There was one about a lemonade stand that was pretty funny too as well. And then I think there was one about like getting lost in the city that she really, really liked as well. So anyway, the stories were really good. It was enjoyable. It was a really nice little way to do some additional readers and have some reading comprehension and handwriting as well, along with the curriculum. So it's a thumbs up from me, and we're going to continue pulling in the Beyond the Code. I think we're going to do another one maybe towards the end of the summer. We'll do it again. We'll do the next level, or we might wait.
Explode the Code, you mean?
Explode the Code, and then we may do another Beyond the Code, I think, later this year.
So. Yeah, depending on how far we can get in AAR.
Yeah, AAR3. Hopefully, yeah. We'll see. Yeah. We'll see. Anyway, so that was our little review of Beyond the Code. So I'll put some links in the show notes below so you guys can check it out.
Thanks so much for joining us today and making us a part of your homeschool journey. Please engage with us on social media. Join our Homeschool Together podcast group on Facebook and find us at Homeschool Together Podcast on Instagram. We'd love to hear your feedback, questions, and recommendations. Until next time,
happy homeschooling!